horrible. She said, that's horrible for you. That's horrible for our children. Of course you can have more time. And then he said, and look, I'll pay you the same child support. It's not about the money.
Wow.
Two kids, 13 years of age, fighting over an orange at school. I want the orange. I want the orange. And the teacher comes up to them and says, oh, you're too old for that. And she cuts the orange in half, right? That's what we know as meeting in the middle. She gives half to each student. Both students are upset. So what didn't the teacher do? The teacher never asked why you want the orange.
What is transformative communication? And what do we know about the art of mediation? Hello, friends, and welcome to Panacea9 podcast by Gloria Y. I am your host, Gloria, and I'm thrilled to be joined by the founder of Spectra Mediation, Marty Edelstein, a seasoned mediator, facilitator, and conflict coach with a deep passion for helping people navigate disputes with clarity and creativity. With extensive experience in family mediation, restorative justice, and corporate conflict resolution, Marty brings a unique approach to fostering understanding and meaningful dialogue. Beyond mediation, Marty is also a musician, a writer, and a photographer. She's been told that whatever she does, including mediation, she does artfully. I'm thrilled to welcome one of my oldest friends, Marty Edelstein. Welcome to our program, Marty.
Thank you, Goli. What a lovely introduction. And I hope I live up to it. It's lovely. Thank you.
You will. I know you. I've known you since the 80s, and we go back such a long time when I was a student in Toronto at Ryerson, and you were one of the first people I met in Toronto, and I became enamored by you right away. At the time, it was your music I was into. I didn't know much about your mediation and all the other stuff you were doing or not doing at that time. I'm not sure, but I just used to listen to your songs, and very, very beautiful. And I still have the CD you gave me, but I don't have a CD player anymore.
Oh, yes, that is a problem. They make great frisbees.
You've been described as to have an artful approach in mediation. So how do you integrate creativity and intelligence in what you do when it comes to conflict resolution?
So you ask the big question up front. Thank you. It's huge. So, I mean, I am an artist of sorts. I'm a dancer, a musician, a writer, photographer. My whole family does some kind of art. And so I've been told that I can't help but come to whatever I do in an artful way. I was doing bookkeeping. I would use different colors. I can't help it. So I would say for mediation, it's really no different. And so I hope that I aspire to bring creativity. I aspire to bring emotional intelligence into my mediation. And I guess first off, it starts with a love of humans and a wish to get to know humans more. I am uber curious about the people that come to my table to mediate. So through both my faith, which is worldwide, and friends that come from.
I share the same faith, and we've spoken about the Baha'i faith quite often on these podcasts.
I have fallen in love with getting to know people, both our commonalities and our differences. And also through science, my own science was a 10-year project where I interviewed both my students and my workshop participants as to what they needed as humans, and discovered through that field research that we really at our core have the same, I think I discovered 13 core interests, and I won't name them all, but certain human universal needs. And the UN did a study as well and found that belonging was at the top of the aspiration of human needs. So belonging, safety, acceptance, respect, dignity, identity, justice, meaning for our lives, and even joy is on that list. And we know scientifically our bodies, the atoms in our bodies need joy. So how these are manifest is what differs, right? Through our cultural lens, through our gender lens, through our age, generational lens. But really at the core, we have those same. So my job as a mediator, many people say, oh, you're here to solve a conflict. Well, I can't get there till I start with this. My job is to, first of all, get curious about people's true needs, past their positions, the positions they come to the table with. And once I unpack those into their interests, I get to the core of where the truth is, and that's where the solutions lie. So how do I do it? I do get creative. I borrow from a lot of modalities. I borrow from healing modalities. I borrow from faith modalities. I borrow from indigenous and cultural stories that I've had experiences with. And I borrow from neuroscience. I've dabbled lately in neuroscience. I can tell you a wee story that I tell students on day one. That's Two Kids and an Orange. I don't know if you've heard that story.
No, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so it's really core to what we do. So two kids, 13 years of age, fighting over an orange at school. I want the orange, I want the orange. And the teacher comes up to them and says, oh, you're too old for that. Get over it. And she cuts the orange in half, right? That's what we know as meeting in the middle. That's reasonable. And she gives half to each student. Both students are upset. So what didn't the teacher do? The teacher went with what she knew. The teacher never asked why you want the orange. What's your interest in the orange? Right? Had she asked why, she would have discovered that one child was thirsty and wanted to suck all the juice out of the orange. The other child wanted to bake muffins, right? Wanted the zest, the skin of the orange to bake muffins. So had she asked why and gotten curious and went back past the positions of I want the orange, to discover those more elegant needs, fears, concerns of the children, she would have been able to satisfy 100% of what they wanted. But instead, they got 50% of. There's also a quote by a 19th century businessman named Charles Kettering. And I love this quote. He said, the difference between a problem and a solution is that we understand the solution. I would add, we think we understand the solution. The teacher thought she understood. And this comes from something we've been doing for a millennia. It's called positional bargaining or distributive bargaining. Yeah, we haggle in the marketplace, and we think that, by going high, low, and meeting in the middle, that we're being smart. Sometimes we are, and that's the ideal solution, and anyone reasonable should end up there. But it didn't satisfy the real core needs of these two children, right? So I slow down, I get to know the people at my table. And then I use techniques that they have to pass what some people might call a smell test, right? They have to be true. They have to be respectful. So I do things permission-based. Yeah. So if I use a tool, I'll ask the parties, I'll ask the people at the table, I want to do this thing. Are you willing to go there? And it's to be voluntary.
That brings me to a question in my head. When people come and sit at your table, do they come willing to listen, to be mediated, or do they come with a sense of resentment in their hearts? And, are they being forced to sit there, or do they want to sit there? Basically, my question is usually, of course, you will have both sides.
Yes, and you just kind of answered your own question. I keep this by my side because the answer to most things is yes and, right?
Let's see that again.
So people come with a willingness 99% of the time. And if we don't, we suss out people who are trying to maybe use mediation to hide things. I let people know right away it's not a place to hide, even though it is voluntary and it is confidential. But if I feel that someone's trying to hide information or hasn't come with the best or highest intentions, then I too come to it voluntarily and I too can end the process if I don't feel
I
it's in
see.
good faith. So I will come at the beginning and say, there's two things that make a good mediation. There's many more, but two main things is good information and good faith. And they do come with the intention to listen, but sometimes not the skill or the capacity to listen. So my other job is to instill that skill, to teach that skill. I can do it before the mediation, again, voluntary, if they accept that we do a workshop and coach one-on-one, and that raises the level of the mediation higher if we do that.
Would you say that when there's three of you around the table, the two different parties that need resolution and yourself as the mediator, would you say that you each contribute one third of the whole thing? Like, are you equal contributors, or do you feel that the mediator contributes more than the other two?
So here, the answer I would give, the mediator should be contributing less.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
yes. So I think people are used to the legal adversary model where people are represented by counsel, and counsel are very talkative, and the judge, chimes in.
Right.
Yeah. So in mediation, we want the parties, even if their lawyers are in the room, we sit the parties closest to us. We want to empower their voice and have them take the lead. And then we'll ask counsel to chime in on any legal matters or anything that's been left out. When I do my job, I will be talking a lot at the beginning, but fading back as I encourage and support two people to talk to each other. So if you think of a triangle from me to the parties, it starts out that they are speaking to me. I set the table, I do my introduction, and they're talking through me. My job is to change that energy and get them talking to each other. And I have tools to do that. And then the more I can fade back, the better, because it really is their problem to solve and their solutions that must come to bear.
Thank you. Can I move on to my second question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing about empathy,
Sure.
because I had mentioned emotional intelligence, and it's something I have a passion about. So forgive me if I just spent
No, please do. That's one of
another
my
minute on this.
passions too.
Yeah. So there's a lot of conversation about it. I've fashioned a toolkit, a communication and conflict toolkit, and I train people on it. I also will work with my own clients before the mediation. And as I said, it raises the level of the mediation. I've had mediations start out with apologies, right?
Really?
They've stopped my introduction. They said, "Oh, can we just do one thing right before you start?" So it's pretty incredible. But a lot of people are talking about empathy, and I don't know that we know really what it is. So it is a key marker for emotional intelligence, and I think we all are craving more of it in the world.
Yeah.
So empathy is not sympathy.
No,
It's not agreement. It's also not therapy,
no.
right? So what is it? The best definition I've read is in a book called The Empathy Exams by a woman named Leslie Jameson. And she did medical role plays to teach doctors how to be empathetic with their clients. And she said, empathy is an attempt to understand both cognitively and viscerally someone else's narrative and experience. And then she said, there's nothing to be fixed. You need to get to the point where you are feeling or vibrating with that person.
I'd like to move on to my second question, and that would be what I know of you. I know that I've heard you say that all communication and conflict resolution is transformative. Is that correct?
It's my belief, yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that I had understood you correctly.
Yes, and I can explain it, but do finish your question.
Yeah, I finished my question and then you can tie it all together. Can you? I would like to hear a real life example, without mentioning names, of course,
Yeah.
where the mediation process truly changed someone's perspective or even life?
Yes, yeah. That's a great question, and I have so many stories, but I did land on one. But first, I want to explain for people who are listening and thinking, "Oh my God, this sounds a little flaky. Not everything can be transformational." And again, there's a scale. I think as soon as any time that people sit down to work things out instead of hashing or fighting or whatever this is that we do now, anonymously. Yeah. I think anytime that we sit down and have a conversation and listen and speak, it's transformational, right? So that's at the lower end of the spectrum. So I can sincerely say that. And we don't do this enough, or it's transformative, whichever word you want to use. But then it depends on our intention and then our skill to get past those surface levels and really listen and really get to know what people's needs, fears, aspirations are. So again, what we do in mediation is speaking and listening, but I also do the skills of self-reflecting and perspective taking. And those can be incredibly transformational. That's what ended up with the apologies at the beginning, like they interrupted my introduction. But this story was really my introduction as an intern in family court, a supervised intern in a case. And I was only supposed to observe, and I ended up participating. So this was my first lesson into another fabulous lesson, which is to show up with Byron Katie. I don't know if you know her work. She's a person that has a certain philosophy and does self-reflect, helps people self-reflect first and work through problems by self-reflecting. So I can talk more about that at some time, but she has a wonderful phrase that I now know. I didn't know then, but I learned it organically. And it's come to things with an I don't know mind,
Okay,
right?
I get that.
So, yeah, and look, you as a journalist, a filmmaker, right? You want to be curious. You've got great questions. And then we know consultation from our faith, from the Baha'i faith. Consultation, we come to the table, we share perspectives, and we suspend judgment, right?
It's
And
very hard to do, but we do.
it's
We try.
yeah, as best we can do. And we come with an I don't know mind. This means we're fully present to what's going on. We can fully listen. So in family court, there was two co-parents who had been divorced for 2 years. They also hadn't spoken in 2 years because he cheated on her and she just cut it. Right. So even with their two young children, aged, I think it was 5 and 7 at the time, in order to share them throughout the week, they would do so by her taking them to her sisters. He would pick them up at her sisters, right?
My.
They hadn't seen each other in 2 years. So they come into court, they see each other in court, and the judge says, why don't you try mediating? So we inherited the case. And so this was the first time they'd seen each other face to face in 2 years. So she's not really looking at him. We're sitting at a round table. She's kind of looking away. So what he wanted was, it was a motion to change their parenting agreement. He wanted 2 more hours a week on his Wednesday night visit. So he had Wednesday nights every other weekend. It's a very common structure when one parent has the lead parenting. And so what did my supervisor think? And most people that have been doing this for a long time. So there's a formula in family law that has a specific number of hours above which or below which you're considered co-parents, and the amount of money owed to the parent fluctuates. So enough said about that. But my supervisor thought this guy wants to pay less child support. Okay, so she had
That's why he wants the extra 2 hours.
that's why she assumed, right? So I, being a newbie, didn't have those assumptions. So I fell into an I don't know mind by accident, right? And I got curious. So the supervisor was doing a lot of work. Remember, I said if we're doing too much work, she was trying to dance around this issue, blah, blah, blah. She wasn't getting anywhere. So I said, can I ask a question? So this also comes from neuroscience, which I didn't know at the time. I said, so Dad, can you take us through the Wednesday night visit with the kids? So what was I doing? We were in our heads then, assuming we knew. I wanted to take him into an experiential understanding and have mom hear
Hear
from
it.
here his experience. So he started describing, well, I pick them up from the school, and then we get home in the winter. I have to get them out of their snowsuits. Then they run to the washroom. Then they want to see the hammy. They want to visit the hamster. Mom turns around. Remember, they hadn't spoken in 2 years. Goes, "You're the hamster? You bought them a hamster?" That's the first bit of empathy. She really felt that. And then she had a horrid look on her face, like she realized that somehow, without saying a word, they weren't dissing each other verbally to their children. Their children picked up on the fact that they shouldn't share information,
Oh,
especially happy information, because mom would feel sad if they knew they were having a good time at dad's,
right.
right? So that was the first thing that happened. Then she got real silent. And then he said, so after that, then they have to do their homework. I give them a little snack, and then I put like the fish sticks in the oven, and then I shove dinner in their faces, and then they go to the washroom again, and I put them in their snowsuits, and I go home, and I have to get them back to mom because it's only 2 hours. And she was horrified. She who hated this man and still had nothing for him,
Right.
still angry at him, was horrified. And one tear came down her face. And I looked at her and I said, "What did you just hear?" And she said, "That's horrible." She looked at me. "That's horrible." Then she looked at him for the first time and said, "That's horrible." She said, "That's horrible for you. That's horrible for our children. Of course you can have more time." And then
Love for children.
yeah. And then he said, "And look, I'll pay you the same child support. It's not about the money." Done. And done in 20 minutes, right? We had 90 minutes to do this. The court had labeled these people vexatious litigants, my least favorite 2 words, right? Because they thought they were the problem. No, the courts, and now the courts are great for many things. They're a protection for weak clients. They do their job. The problem is the courts don't let the clients speak. So we never get to experience empathy,
The human side of the issue.
this kind of empathy.
That's moving. I mean, just to hear that is moving. And for somebody who was a single mom and whose children lived through kinds of being afraid of, upsetting dad or upsetting mom, I know what those children must have felt. And when she realized she was hurting her children, that's when the love for the children was greater than the hate for the guy.
Well said. Yes,
That's
absolutely. And I mean, kudos to her. It's not easy to let go anger. Your question before, was, do people come willing to listen, or are they angry? Yes, they're always angry at the beginning and they don't hear. And our job is to find the tools to break through that.
This was very heartwarming to hear. Now, let's move on. Just because of our time limitations, whether in family, community, or corporate settings, emotions can rise high, very high in conflicts. What are the key strategies for diffusing tension and guiding people towards resolution without necessarily squashing their emotions? Because
Yeah.
people are attached to their emotions. But then I would imagine as a mediator, you have to deal with those emotions somehow. Anyway, I'll let you speak. I don't know the answers. I just
It's a great question. And again, I may be in a minority of people that look at emotions in this way. So, and thank you for saying without shutting down emotions, right? So
right.
I welcome emotions at my table, and I let people know that emotions
Right.
are information. If we shut down emotions, we shut down information. So there is a movement, I guess, or philosophy called it's not NLP. It's nonviolent communication. You know what? I should check this. That they're both important. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and nonviolent communication, NVC. I believe it's the latter, where a woman named Maria Mirashiro said that emotions are information. And she said, when our needs are met, we have positive emotions, right? When we're
Mhm.
happy, when our
That would
needs
make
are met.
sense.
When our needs are not met, we can go into negative emotion, when we're not heard, when we're not understood, when we're frustrated, right? So anger is a particular thing. I'm not going to call it an emotion. In my world, it's a position. So remember Two Kids and an Orange? I want the
Right.
orange, I want the orange. Anger, I treat as such a position. And then I get curious, as the teacher did not, right? I say, why? Why is this person angry? So I invite them to say, and I did this with a very violent person at family court one night when I was there alone after hours, and they snuck in and they leaned over my desk and started yelling. And I said to him, which knocked him back into his seat because no one had ever spoken to him like this. I said, I'm curious. First of all, you are extremely angry. I didn't sugarcoat it. I said what it was, right? And that was my way of letting him be heard and understood. I said, you are incredibly angry, but I'd like to know why. What happened to you today to make you so angry? Do you have time to share it with me? Knocked him down. It was like a cold wind blew, knocked him into his chair. And then he did share with me. And I found out anger to me is a position that we take because we don't have very often the emotional vocabulary to describe really what's going on. And we end up in anger. Anger always represents something else: frustration, fear, grief, not being heard, not being understood, not feeling valued. So I get curious, but the important thing with emotions at the mediation table is we want to handle them safely. We want to make sure that everyone feels safe, mostly the other person not feeling that emotion. So if someone's angry, I will then turn to the other person and say, I'd like to get curious about Brian's anger. Amy, would you be willing to get curious with me?
Mm,
If she is, we do it together, and I'll ask Brian, I'm making up names,
right, of
to
course.
face me when he talks instead of sending it to her, even if it's about her. If she can't be in the presence of it, then I'll go into what we call a caucus, a private meeting, to talk to him about what's going on. And then if I do that, I'll meet with her and check in with her, right? So we want to do it safely. But the other thing about dealing with emotions at the table is it teaches my clients that emotions are not the problem. It's how they handle it, and do they get curious, and are they listening to emotions? I don't think, I'm one of those people, maybe I'm the only one, that doesn't think that emotional intelligence means damping down your emotions and not feeling them and not showing them. I think that leads to illness.
I agree with you. I think because as someone who's been labeled emotional, and so many people have tried to squash my emotions because they didn't know how to handle my emotions, or it made them feel uncomfortable that
Yeah.
I was, emotional. I agree. I think they lacked emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
If they had emotional intelligence, they would have not been so judgmental.
Yeah, or they may lack the capacity to understand it, or they might have triggers from their own trauma. And
That's
being in
true.
the presence of too much emotion brings up their triggers. They could be an empath. It's too much for them. There's all sorts of reasons we need to get curious about. But yes, I
No,
don't
but
think
in my
shutting.
case, though, although I can understand what you just said, but in my case, though, it's been people who thought they were doing me a favor by squashing my emotions. They thought they were fixing me.
Yeah.
They thought that being emotional would not be in my best interest.
Yes, and maybe they saw it as a weakness, whereas it's your
Exactly.
superpower.
That's exactly how they considered it. It was a weakness.
Yeah.
They loved me. They didn't want to see my weakness.
Yeah.
And therefore, they tried to belittle what bothered me, to
Yeah.
belittle my concerns. And of course, that's very hurtful. Anyway, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. Go ahead.
And that is not empathy.
No, no.
Yeah. No, it's emotions are fascinating to me. And so when I get people sitting at the table and I normalize emotions, it stops them from demonizing each other.
What is restorative justice? How can mentorship be most effective? And how do we engage in building bridges? We will have to explore that in the next episode of Panacea9 podcast together with Marty Edelstein. Please come back next week for the second part of this engaging conversation and stay well. Please subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. It will only take you a second to just press that button. But that goes a long way in making sure that our programming gets seen by more and more people. So we would appreciate that subscription. And if you want to be extra generous to us, you can also like and drop a comment, any comment you wish. Thank you so much for listening to us. And I hope you come back next week for the second part of my conversation with Marty Edelstein. Bye, Marty, and bye, everyone. Have a great week.